And then Linux is like, I don't know, and it turns off a P core and you lose 2 threads. It is a crash dumpster fire.
So I saw a comment on Reddit that said, GPU VRAM limitation. How could that be?
Yeah, it's got to be a game bug, right? No, not so fast there, Chuckles. That's actually a CPU problem.
Yeah, Chuckles. Hey everyone, so I'm joined by Wendell, and you just published a video about Intel.
Oh, I think it's bad. It's real bad.
It's bad. Is Intel screwed?
Yeah, they might be.
Okay.
So when I started this, I was like, they'll figure this out with microcode and a geese, like getting the equations just right and making sure everything with turbo. We're talking about, of course, the crashing that gamers are experiencing with the 13900K, 14900K, KF, KS, and the other variants with that. And it's been kind of a wild ride.
Before that, this video is brought to you by NZXT's C1500 Platinum Power Supply, which has passed the Cybernetics Titanium standard for efficiency. NZXT has been certified for efficient operation upwards of 94% and uses a 140mm fan to help run quieter under load. This 180mm form factor power supply is fully modular, using capacitors rated for 105 degrees Celsius. Learn more at the link in the description below. Yeah, so this story, for anyone who's not fully caught up, but this story's had a lot of different, I'll call them red herrings. Maybe they're related in different ways, but the biggest one has been power profiles, right? There's this whole thing of the rumors about motherboard vendors are implementing Intel base power profile, extreme, and all these other ones.
Which are causing problems with CPUs.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where everyone was looking for a while and really spending resources of, okay, so is it the boosting behavior and the power limit, the PL1, PL2, that Intel institutes that causes this instability. We got a tip recently, I'm not going to go into in this video, it's different than what you're doing though, and maybe related, we'll see, we'll find out.
We'll see, we know.
We've got some interesting leads. I can't say more because I don't want Intel to know what I know. But let's talk about your stuff first, since that'll give us a good primer.
It's the game development side of it. So you look at games and games crash and you get game crash telemetry. And so I reached out to some contacts that I have, 2 different games, both based on Unreal, and I got access to their full crash database. So these are crash dumps. It is a crash dumpster fire.
Yes, as you said earlier, does it rise to the level of pants on fire bad?
It does, I think. And like, I didn't think so when I started looking at this, but fast forward, okay, you're looking at game databases. It's like, okay, is this person overclocking their machine? Have they degraded their CPU because they gave it 1.7 volts or something crazy?
Right.
You don't really know. And a lot of the crash database stuff is not structured in a way to deal with inconsistent crashing. And there are some consistent crashes, like the GPU out of VRAM error. There's another one, RadV Game Tools put out a bulletin that said if you have one of these specific Intel CPUs, chances are you're affected because you'll get a decompression error. And so this is a detected error. But that code is so old, it's unlikely that it has a new bug that is tripped up by these particular Intel CPUs.
So they basically said, hey, if the problem points to us, it's not our problem.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, good luck, gamers.
Yeah.
And it's been like 5 months, and Intel hasn't come out and said something that I would love to see, which is, hey, gamers, we will take care of you. We'll make you whole. We'll figure out what the problem is, and we'll take care of it. It's been like 5 months.
So let's start a little bit with the beginning of this. So first part is talking about crash dumps and game development. Right?
Yeah.
So we were talking about, like you said sort of briefly here, but one of the challenges with random Reddit posts online, especially, is you don't have all the information. It's really hard to know, was it this guy's particular configuration that he created? Yeah. Right? Or is it actually an Intel silicon problem or whatever, maybe BIOS configuration? So the reason that you started looking at server side stuff,
I had to switch gears.
It's the reliability, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in the crash database, but not all of it was actionable. I mean, I found errors that seemed like CPU crashing was creating NVMe errors. And it's like, what do you do with that? Yeah. And is your crash database set up to do with that? So we flipped it around, got to talking to data center providers, and yeah, it turns out that the 13900, 13900K, 14900K, KF, KS, those are popular for game servers versus, big giant Xeon systems because of the high core clock speed and because of something called the blast radius, which is when one of the servers goes out, how many players does it take down?
Oh, okay. That's a good name for that.
Yeah, it's like the blast radius of this server dying is only going to take out a couple of dedicated game servers running on this machine.
Right.
And then so looking at it from that angle, actually sort of released the floodgates. In reaching out to those contacts, those companies have been super frustrated because they're just on this continuous cycle. It seems to me, based on the anecdotal evidence of talking to them, that they've been replacing hardware and replacing CPUs, look at a system stable, and it'll be stable for a few months, and then something happens and it becomes progressively more unstable.
So let me interrupt for a second. So server providers who use like a K-SKU CPU, are they less likely to use, so to me, it seems unreasonable or weird for a server provider to say use a Z series motherboard and like overclock the product.
Yeah, they'll actually use a W680.
Okay.
So in the whole universe, I'm talking about a total of around 210 systems across, well, actually probably closer to 250 across 3 providers. I just added a 3rd provider. But the original data set was about 210 systems across 2 providers. And it was a mix of Supermicro and Asus W680 motherboards. And the failure rate between Asus brand motherboards and Supermicro brand motherboards was almost the same, and that was 50%. 50% of the CPUs that I encountered in the 13th and 14th gen cohort experienced some type of failure in a 7 working day period. That's where they're running continuously.
That seems insane to me, because so if it's 50%, I trust the data source you have. I guess the question I have is, we were talking about this earlier, but 50% seems like such an enormous amount that it would be the only thing you see on every hardware Reddit.
Yeah.
I guess the difference is these are server providers, so maybe they're less likely to be vocal about it. It's a business issue.
Yeah, one of them said that they pulled all their 13th gen and Intel had agreed to provide 14th gen as a replacement. And that was fine for a while, but now the 14th gen are starting to have similar issues.
Okay.
Some of it is also down to DDR5 memory speeds. And so some of the machines we've been able to bring back into stability by using DDR5 4200.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 40, and limiting the multiplier to 53, which I think was in some of the
Are you
the
better
old,
just going with Ryzen at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like the 7950X is basically, like we have, historically those providers have not used Ryzen in those kind of volumes. But at Computex, we saw a crap load of AM5 based systems that were set up for these kinds of deployments.
Well, it seems terrifying for Intel
Yeah.
if the server company, because server companies have enormous buying power.
Yeah.
So if you start scaring them away and they go to AMD because they don't want to have a blast radius of players every time a system goes down, that just seems not sustainable.
Yeah, half the systems with the W680, and these are W680 power defaults too, so that's I think 125 watt TDP.
Yeah.
You look at the boards, and the boards say we're going to run these K-series CPUs at the lower power targets to begin with. These are CPUs that have never seen a higher power wattage. And it's interesting that it's still, I don't want to call it a failure because it's not like a failure the way you would experience on like a gaming computer. Like if your computer only did something weird once in a week,
right?
You might, I mean, that's just Windows, right?
Yeah.
But these are Linux servers, they're running 24/7, and there's something in the system log, or there's a game crash, or they're, like the kernel, the Linux kernel log. I have one system that has one P core, and it'll just turn off. And it'll run fine for like 4 days. And then Linux is like, I don't know, and it turns off a P core and you lose 2 threads. And like, that's really wild. Running Y Cruncher to like try to do burn-in testing, it's stable, it's fine. And then it gets to the S&T testing in Y Cruncher, it dies every time. But I've only got like one system at one provider and 2 systems at another provider that die in exactly that way.
Okay.
It's really wild. And the 50% that are fine work
so
fine
can you
at
pinpoint
5200.
that consistently to one thing?
No.
No.
The CPU, sometimes it's an E core, sometimes it's a P core, sometimes it's a memory operation. One of the Y Cruncher tests, memory footprint is only about 21 meg. So that's like 90% operating from cache.
Yeah.
And it still will have errors sometimes.
Maybe that kind of gets into the tip we are withholding a little bit for another video. But interesting. So then what is if you're seeing across some providers a 50% failure rate, let me start with this because I think most people watching are going to be consumers. The extrapolation is, does that mean it is reasonable to expect a similar failure rate in the consumer market? I would assume no, only because I haven't seen enormous volume.
Maybe.
But it looks like you're going for maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, because keep in mind that in this server context, running 24/7 for 7 days might translate to running a month, 8 hours a day.
So it's an aging
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to couch a lot of this in maybes because it's not 100% certain, but...
Yeah, one error a week on something like that, even though it's not running in an overclocking configuration, isn't, I mean, you wouldn't want that, but it's not, you know, crashing every 10 minutes. But there are some CPUs in the population that are crashing every 10 minutes, even at DDR5 4200, even at a multiplier lock of 52, even
that's
disabling
insane.
E-cores.
I mean, that's like...
Yeah.
If I'm a server provider and I have a server going down every 10 minutes, I feel like you have to take it out of commission.
Yeah.
Because it's going to hurt your customer base.
Yeah.
Because the customer, whether it's a game company or whatever, is going to be pissed at the server provider.
Yeah. One of the companies has told me that they have stopped listing new systems for sale based on 14th gen CPUs until they have a satisfactory explanation.
Wow, okay.
In a parallel thread, I also reached out to OEMs like Dell, Lenovo, and HP, seeing if they were willing to go on or off record for what they were going to leak. And the memos that they have from those are like 10 to 25% of CPUs may need to be replaced.
Yeah.
Again, hearsay, that's a rumor. Maybe, like, if I'm seeing a 50% failure rate, maybe they can fix half of those failures in an Agiza update, or in a microcode update,
right,
or in a BIOS update, or you know, something like that. And the reason I've got Agiza on the brain is we have seen this kind of thing from AMD as well. Like, AMD has had these kinds of instability that they've been able to resolve with microcode updates.
Yeah.
But then famously, you know, the exploding CPUs problem, that is not something you can fix with microcode alone, especially after you've already got a damaged CPU.
Oh no, there's no fixing it once it's damaged, physically damaged. Yeah.
The thing that sets this apart here is that the W680 chipset, theoretically, has never exposed those CPUs to untoward conditions.
So unless there is some kind of insane motherboard behavior, like we saw on some of the X3D exploding boards, you can kind of rule that out if it's working as designed as a point of failure.
It doesn't seem like it's a Z690, Z790 problem.
Yes, it starts to get into, so the initial topic was, is Intel just pushing this too hard? And that seemed reasonable to believe.
There's no 12th gens that have had these problems in the cohort.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah, and 12, 13, 14 are all fairly related. So, I mean...
I think I found a total of 4 OODL crashes out of millions of data points versus tens of thousands of OODL crashes from game crashes for 13th and 14th gen, and like maybe 4 AMD crashes.
What is something... Whenever we make a deep dive video, we have to leave stuff out because of time.
Yeah.
Where the video just gets too long, no one's going to watch it. Is there anything that you left out that you want to kind of throw out there?
I can't. It seems like 50% is like it's such a large number that I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a missing piece to this puzzle because more people will be climbing the walls. But at the same time, when I'm talking about a 50% failure, I'm talking about one failure in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, running for a week.
Right.
And so it's just like this system has a problem. But some of those systems have problems like they turn off. And you know, we monitor the PDU, we monitor the PDU, we monitor the
you just got like the Men in Black brain wipe.
we monitor the PDU because the data center has, like, they know how much power each system is drawing.
Yeah.
And we also know the temperature, because we were logging the temperatures, because these are Linux servers, so we know all of that. And when you're running on a W680, the temperature on those with the cooling that the data center has is like 55, 60, 65. It doesn't, you know, like 70 is like the hot spot temperature.
Yeah.
You know, I think the hottest...
It's not thermal.
Yeah, across the whole population of hundreds of servers, the hottest hotspot I saw was 83C.
Okay. Well, that seems completely reasonable, especially given that it's probably in a hotter environment.
Yeah.
Surrounded by other servers.
Yeah.
So, okay, so, I mean, if one of the messages you sent to me I think is worth talking about is, if it's this bad, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it. My interpretation was it's almost like whatever gains Intel has had with this generation seem now to be almost unfairly represented.
Yeah.
Because it's my kind of interpretation here, but if a company's selling a product that can win certain benchmarks or comparisons, but it does so in a way which is not actually stable for daily use, then to me it's not really valid in our type of benchmarking.
Well, how do we have data center logs from where these systems first went online, And with these systems first going online, 6 months ago, they would pass these specific tests. Rerunning these specific tests now on the exact same hardware, it will not pass. That's wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, have they robbed their competitors of more of a victory by effectively having unachievable long-term performance? Yeah, like,
I mean, half of them are okay.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's just like, did they have 2 lines?
Do you need a job at Intel?
Yeah. It's just, what is going? But if you're a gamer, that's terrible, and I think that's where Intel could come out and say, "Hey, we're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna make you whole." Intel does know there's an issue, so we got that. That's nice.
Do you think they? I was gonna say, do you think they know what it is? But I guess since I think I know what it is, they probably know what it is. But
I strongly suspect they know what it is too, and I strongly suspect that there are those inside of Intel that think that it cannot be completely solved via a software update.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll find out.
I would have argued with you on that before I started, because it's like, these things happen. I'm sure it's fine. I'm less sure after having worked on this for 4 months that it is fine.
Well, so I would have also argued with me on that point. I do it frequently. But I think, Hardware Unboxed, shout out to them, did some excellent testing on the different power plans for motherboards and showing how it affects performance. And this was very important because if Intel or motherboard vendors change the boosting behavior after the fact, then that has to be accounted for at some point because it's going to be different. And I would have, based on the information we had, fully assumed that's kind of the direction from which these CPUs are becoming unstable as a power issue. It makes a lot of sense. It's like, are they boosting too high? Are they becoming thermally unstable? Is there degradation of the chip because of that?
That would make sense on a Z-series chipset. But the W680 is a little bit of a smoking gun here.
Yeah, so that's the key point I want everyone from the audience here to take away is specifically what Wendell's looking at on server with W680, that's kind of the key. And now to caveat it, that's not to say that the power profile stuff is also is not to blame as well, right? Like, it could also be to blame. It could be a separate problem. Yeah,
it could be all of those things working together.
Right.
And again, none of that matters as long as you have Intel and partners coming together to say, sorry gamers, we'll make you whole. I feel like that the reason that I got some of the information I did, which I don't trust fully because I got it this way, is because there are people that are unhappy that are large volume customers that don't feel they have been made whole.
Well, that's why it's so important to get multiple sources because the first one then maybe has an axe to grind, so you try to get some other sources. And if you've got multiple this scale of systems, then at least some level of the information is probably accurate. So it definitely points you a direction.
I think also some of the misdirection and crashing is why this hasn't bubbled up sooner, is because everybody's sort of working under different assumptions. There is a reasonable-ish sounding explanation on the table, but like the messaging that Intel seems to be giving large OEMs like Dell, HP, Lenovo seems very different than smaller providers that are only buying CPUs a couple of thousands at a time.
Smaller providers buying a couple thousand at a time. See how big Intel is,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the numbers we've heard for potential defects is in the millions for information I've received. I have not verified that. I don't know how accurate it is.
Random sampling of 250. Again, it's not a huge population.
Yeah.
But if you've got a game and you got, one of the game developers said straight up, it's going to cost me over $100,000 in lost players, to say nothing of everything else.
Well, also the knock-on effect of how does it affect their business in the future?
Yeah.
Because the player doesn't care.
Yeah, they literally have screenshots from their support forum that are, this game is buggy because the GPU out of VRAM error is, and it's not physically possible for one of the games to use more than 20 gigs of VRAM.
Yeah. Well, so this is what, it kind of reminds me of the Zotac situation, totally different problem. The thing that it reminds me, though, is with Zotac, as soon as it was business to business, it really mattered and it needed to be solved immediately. And so like here, you're talking about servers and Intel, that's B2B.
Yeah.
Like the level of concern should be pretty escalated at Intel.
Yep.
Intel has like famously, wow, nice, we got some lights.
Nice.
We'll see if we get arrested in a few minutes. It's the spotlights. Historically though, Intel's pretty tight-lipped about things. So
Yeah.
it's not
Well, you don't want to spook everybody because shareholders get wind of that, and then it's just like, oh no, what's going on? Whereas you can go to your data center providers and be like, hey, we'll give you 14th gen to replace your 13th gen. Are you good with that? It's like, but I still have to pay all those guys to change those CPUs.
Yeah.
Well, we'll throw in 5 or 10 extra.
Right. Great.
Great.
So where do you see this going next? What do you want to see from Intel?
I really hope that Intel would come out and say, hey, we're going to make gamers whole, because this kind of stuff happens.
Well, let me ask, you keep saying that, let's define that. What does that mean?
Replace the CPU or fix the problem with whatever it is. And I think that probably half of the CPUs that are experiencing these kind of issues, probably on the order of half of them will probably end up needing to be replaced. That would be great. That'd be a great start.
Experience issues. That was the caveat you had there, the qualifier,
Yeah.
So you think half that experience issues will need to be replaced?
Which would be about 25% of the population that I have.
Right.
And that's even at really super conservative settings. So you may not, even though you got a K processor, you may have rolled more of a 1 than you realize if you're going to be running at like DDR5 5200 or 4200 or 4400 or whatever. So that would be great. And then the second thing is there's a lot more data out there in those databases. Go hunting. It's hard to do, select star where CPU is unstable, but you can maybe start correlating the data where it's these specific CPUs and just looking to see if the type of failure is maybe a little irregular versus playtime. So like I had to put together the marketing analytics database, which is how much time people are spending in games. The developers don't usually get that, as it turns out. And say, okay, from this population that's playing the game this long, how many crashes are they experiencing grouped by CPU? It's actually very hard to do that, even with very advanced tools. And so now that we've pointed that out, maybe more people will say, hey, we should do that internally and look for it. One of the game companies said they're going to have to roll back some bans. They thought people were cheating because the state of the game client was inconsistent with the server for some people enough that they were like, we don't know what they're doing, but the game client is inconsistent with the server, we're just going to ban them.
Yeah, okay. So this really causes a lot of effect, like chain reaction.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of what Wendell wants to see in the next steps. I guess if you're a game developer, you work for one, maybe raise the issue to your server team or something.
Go to your database and look. Steam has a lot of good telemetry for this kind of stuff. So if you get a Steam game, and you've added the telemetry, you can probably, but you add your own, like it's not just, like Valve doesn't really provide anything amazing. You add your own stuff on top of it. But all the plumbing and user agreements for that kind of stuff are there.
Right. Okay. Well, so on our side, I only recently received a tip that seems pretty credible, and Wendell and I have been talking about it. We're going to see what we can do.
It's an interesting explanation.
Yeah, it would take some time to really thoroughly work through, but it is something we're capable of, and I'll leave it there. So,
if you have one of those CPUs, good luck. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Or if you do have one of those, email either one of us, and we'll figure out. We have some ideas. We have some stuff we can do with it. Particularly useful if it has failed, if it's no longer working. But check out his video. It's going to be on Level 1 Techs. Please go watch it. Wendell has done an excellent job recently, especially
Intel has a problem.
Yeah. So you've got that one, and then also a Microsoft Qualcomm video.
Yeah.
Which that one I have had a chance to watch through. That's really good. So
it's a little bit clickbait, but it's probably okay.
No, it's fine. It's not clickbait. You deliver on the title. So check them out. Level 1 Techs. I'll link it below. And thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. It's awesome.
We'll see you all next time.
No more pants on fire craziness.